Well, you've arrived at just the right time. Welcome.
We nearly sold out.
Look at that. Yeah, absolutely. All you got to do is just put out the right number of chairs. There you go. Welcome to Season 2 of Have a Kind Word with Yourself, the podcast. I'm so glad to be back sharing more wonderful chats with amazing creatives all about how we can keep kind, creative, and connected. And this first episode of Season 2 is a super special way to begin the season with a live recording from the 2026 Huddersfield Literature Festival. Okay. Welcome to Have a Kind Word with Yourself, the podcast. It is an absolute joy to be here with you. My name is Rose Kondo. I'm a poet, I'm a performer, I'm a podcaster, and I love connecting with creative communities. And here we are in Huddersfield at the 20th anniversary Huddersfield Literature Festival. Let's give that a clap. So the festival is celebrating its 20th anniversary of bringing words to life. We have Michelle Hodgson, the director here. She and her incredible team of staff and volunteers have been doing amazing work and just going from strength to strength with the festival. And I do want to give a quick shout out because I've been involved with the festival. I host the Poetry Slam and I do various other things, workshops. And I've gotten to do author events and hosted events with Matt Haig and Joanne Harris, name drop. And it was through doing those and having those lovely chats with people that I thought, I kind of want to try and do that more regularly. Maybe I'll do a podcast. So Michelle, thank you, because that was kind of the seed for this to happen. We are also at Amped, which is a relatively new venue in Huddersfield, and it's a community venue. They have been doing festival events here. They did a film screening last weekend, and they're bringing more live music and cultural events to Huddersfield, so we're really pleased to be here. So if you're new to the podcast, welcome. We are in season 2. This is season 2. And if you've heard any of season 1, you'll know that in each episode, I talk to a fellow creative about their work and some of the things that help them to keep well along the way. And I use the letters in the word kind to frame our chat. I love the distribution of hot drinks happening. It's great. So before we start, I'd love for you to just take a moment and think of something that brings you joy. So maybe that's an object or a person, your favorite song. I just feel like taking moments to connect with our joy can be a big boost for inner kindness. As the siren goes by. We are going to get started. Welcome, you have come at the exact right time. Come on in, grab a seat. I am absolutely thrilled at this live recording to welcome my guest, Nick Barley. So Nick is the founding director of the National Poetry Centre, a new Leeds-based organization which is the brainchild of poet laureate Simon Armitage, supporting engagement with poetry across the UK. Nick is also a professor in practice at Durham University, advising on a major research project into reading and the imagination. He was formerly director of the Edinburgh International Book Festival and a trustee of the Booker Prize Foundation, and he was born in Yorkshire, cycled the southern coast of Spain, and once had to read 146 novels in a 6-month period. Welcome to Have a Kind Word with Yourself.
It's so weird having your history read out like that as a list of achievements when you missed out all the other bad bits in between, the difficult bits, the boring bits. But thank you for picking out a few highlights.
Well, absolutely. You've done some incredible things for sure. And I guess to kick us off, I'd love to know what are some kind words that you've heard recently?
Well, I've just spent a joyful hour and a half with my sister, my big sister, who's here in the audience, and she is an absolute champion of kind words. And when you asked me to think of something joyful, I thought spending time with my sister is a joyful thing. We don't get to spend enough time with our family, and love her dearly. And so she mentioned some kind words to me earlier on, just about life and about my family, and so that's what I'm thinking about.
Oh, that's wonderful. I really love that. So older sister, how many years between you?
18 months, was it?
Ah,
Something
right.
like that.
Okay. That's pretty close in
Yeah,
age.
pretty
That's
close.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything fun that you did in that hour and a half?
Yeah, we walked along the canal. Huddersfield's got this amazing canal system, which I was completely unaware of. I don't know whether people in the audience know about it. You probably go, like, yeah, But for me, it was absolutely, I had no idea. It's such a beautiful walk. And there were geese with little baby goslings going along, flapping their wings and their feet under the water. It was just a beautiful walk. I really recommend it.
Oh, amazing. That also makes me think that my husband Kieran and I, whenever we see little geese, because they're goslings, and Ryan Gosling is a notable Canadian, we call them, oh, look, there's some Ryans. So yeah, glad you got to see some Ryans. That's great. And normally at this point, I also chat with my guest about how we first met. But that's today.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I've kind of known of your work for a bit, and it was through the festival that we had this opportunity to chat.
Yeah, although I think, I'm not sure, we may have met online once, and I'm not sure whether you were there, because it was a group of about 50 poets who were taking part in a project, the Young Poet Laureate initiative that we've just been working on over the last year. And you, I'm delighted to say, are one of our poet mentors, working with young people. And so I was involved in an online session in which a number of poets came, and I think you may have been there.
I was, yeah.
Right, so, and that is a project which is all about kindness, because it's about helping young people understand the value of poetry in their lives at a time when schools and teachers who are under so much pressure and so stressed really struggle to fit poetry into the curriculum beyond what they absolutely have to teach in GCSE and A-level. And our project has been about thinking about what can poetry be beyond that horrible tick box exercise in which people have to interpret poems and there's a kind of right and wrong answer. Do you get it or do you not? And when kids inevitably don't get it, they think they're rubbish at poetry and they're turned off poetry for the rest of their lives. Yeah. And so the Young Poet Laureate program, as well as trying to identify future superstars, is about inculcating in young people a sense that poetry is okay, that using words to express yourself and to observe the world around you and to try and make sense of the challenges is a really good way of being kind to yourself. Because kindness, if it's anything, it's about noticing. You can't be kind unless you notice to whom you need to be kind. And if you notice that, then you're probably also the kind of person who can notice details and who can put those into words. And I think poetry comes from that kind act of observation and noticing what's around us. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's such a lovely way to connect that program with kindness. And I'll admit, I hadn't kind of thought of it in that depth before. So yeah, beautiful words. Well, then also nice to see you again, because I remember that giant Zoom. But the first time in the flesh, that's for sure. It's really nice to meet you.
You have knees and feet, so that's lovely to see for sure. And I mean, you do so many different things, you wear so many hats, and I wonder, in the midst of all of that, is there something in particular that you really love about the creative work that you do?
Yeah. I'm somebody, I don't know, I think in the audience I'm sure there are people who write and who are creative people, but I'm somebody who has found the most joy in my life from helping other creative people reach an audience. So facilitating other people's creativity has somehow felt like the most creative thing I can do. Whenever I find myself being creative personally, I look at the results of my work and it doesn't give me confidence or joy. I'm deeply unconfident about my own writing or my own creative acts, whether it's making pictures or writing words. When I give other people a chance to be creative, that really gives me confidence, it gives me joy, and that's where I know I can be at my best. And so that facilitation of the creative act is why I found myself originally in publishing, and then as a journalist, and then eventually running a literary festival, and now setting up a National Poetry Centre. What I feel is that I'm laying the groundwork for creativity everywhere. Everyone's got creativity, and I feel I can nurture it and sow the seeds of it and watch it flourish everywhere.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, that's absolutely beautiful. I think the world needs creative connectors as well, really, to kind of put those connections together for sure. Can you talk a little bit about the National Poetry Centre?
Yeah, delighted to do that. It began with Simon Armitage, the Poet Laureate, who was appointed in 2019 as Poet Laureate, and it's a 10-year appointment by the Queen. It's quite a big deal.
Yeah.
And I hadn't realised this, but every Poet Laureate is offered a legacy project.
Right.
So you're going to be laureate of 10 years. What legacy do you want to leave? That's what they're asked at the beginning. And so one of the previous laureates, Andrew Motion, set up a thing called the Poetry Archive, which is recordings of poems by notable poets. And it's an archive of poetry. You should look at it online. It's absolutely amazing. The oldest one is Tennyson, who recorded The Charge of the Light Brigade on a wax cylinder in 1880. And it still exists in the Poetry Archive. You can look it up online. And you can hear the voice of Tennyson. And it goes through amazing poets like Stevie Smith, Auden. It's absolutely extraordinary. And it goes all through to today. Mm-hmm. Simon, when asked what your legacy should be, he said, well, I don't think there's an organisation that really stands up for poetry and tries to raise the profile of poetry across the country. So I would like my legacy to be a national poetry centre. And the civil servant that he was talking to said, well, the trouble is that, there aren't that many buildings in London which would be available for such a thing.
Oh.
And he said, well, I wasn't thinking of London, mate. So they said, well, where on earth would it be then? And so he said, well, how about making it in the geographical centre of the United Kingdom?
Yeah.
Somebody, when I said that to somebody, they said, what, Wakefield? But he said, no, Leeds. Leeds is probably the most central big city in the country, so let's put it in Leeds. And what then commenced in 2019 was a set of conversations with the Arts Council, Leeds City Council, West Yorkshire Combined Authority, those kinds of the big authorities. Would you like a national arts organisation in your city? And to which they all went, yeah. And would you like to put some money into a national poetry centre? Maybe we'll have to go through the processes and And then COVID struck, and it all went quiet. But Simon was still pretty keen on having a national poetry centre, and it wasn't until I stepped down from the Edinburgh Book Festival, which I used to run, in 2023, and very shortly after that, they approached me and asked me to put my name forward into the hat to apply for the job as director of the National Poetry Centre, and they gave me the job in May 24, so two years ago. And at that point, nothing really very much had happened because of COVID and because of whatever other stuff had happened.
Yeah.
So it was just getting back up and running. So we've had 2 years to try and get this project up and running. And what they had got was the University of Leeds had offered a building.
Amazing. You
can use this space, currently a derelict building, if you do it up, and then you can have it rent-free or, peppercorn rent for 40 years. So we were like, yeah, we'll take that offer. And then we got a costing done, and it was £20 million to restore the building.
Wow.
So that became my challenge. Raise 20 million quid,
yeah.
Set up a new charity, which will become a national arts organisation in Leeds. And I thought, that's a pretty good challenge for me. That's something that I really, really am happy with.
Yeah.
And so now, 2 years in, we have 3/4 of the money we need.
Amazing.
So we've got £15 million in the pot.
Wow, that's incredible.
Of money that was, I have to say again, because people think, surely that money should go to poets. Well, it will eventually, once the building opens, but it wasn't going to come to poets, because this is capital money that's come from Treasury and from University of Leeds, capital money, which would otherwise have gone into a business school or a chemistry building. It's going into creating a national poetry centre, and we're about to appoint architects, and we're about to get the design done, and we have a really, really nice deadline, which is the month when the laureate steps down.
Right.
The end of his tenure, which will be May 2029.
Wow.
So I have committed to having that building open to the public by May 2029. So I'm setting my deadline of end of 28 as what I'm saying to the contractors. You finish that building by then, we open the doors by then, and that's what we're going to do.
Amazing. So basically 3 years from now,
Yeah.
that building's going to be up and running?
Yeah, and so we've been so fortunate to have raised enough money so far that we can start.
Yeah.
That the contractors and the architects and all that have got enough confidence that they will go for it. So we know we're going to be able to do this project. In the meantime, I've always said to Simon and to everybody else, you cannot say, build it and they will come. That's not a thing. It's a nice poetic phrase, but it's not true.
Yeah.
We have to engage people with the idea of poetry around the country before the building opens its doors, so that when the building opens to the public, a few people have heard of it.
Yeah.
And go, oh yeah, I've been engaged with that. I've done something with that. And so we've set about setting up a whole set of projects and programs and activities, including the Young Poet Laureate program that you're part of, to get people up to speed with it, so that when the building does open its doors, people go, great, I'm there. I want to visit that because I've already been part of it. And we're already trying to raise the profile of poetry across the country.
Everything that you're saying feels amazing. I mean, congratulations on raising that amount of money and the galvanizing of things in the 3 years now until the building is open. And I think we are in such a time of bleak news and things feeling very dire. This has just exploded hope in my heart. So yeah, thank you for sharing about that. And we will all keep our eyes out for sure for developments of current projects and then the building opening. So yeah.
I mean, I think there's just one small thing I would add to what I was saying, which is that there are many people who write poetry. There are not many people who say they can make a living from writing poetry. So it's not regarded as a profession as such by all that many people. So I think when you say poetry, I don't know how many of you in the audience are poets, but if you say, I'm a poet to people, sometimes you kind of go like, yeah, what else do you do? Or, I haven't read a poem since I was 14, sort of thing. People kind of lean back, don't they? Or some of them do anyway. I think my starting position with the National Poetry Centre is to think that all of the people who are already published by Faber, Bloodaxe, Carcanet, etc., brilliant people, they're probably not my first target audience because they're already on board.
Right.
They've had to fight bloody hard to get that book published. My audience are people who don't yet know that poetry is for them. So that the starting position is to persuade people that poetry is all around us all the time. If the people who lean back when I say I'm setting up a National Poetry Centre, when I say to them, well, but do you listen to music? They go, yeah, of course. Do you listen to the lyrics? Like most of them go, yeah, of course. So what are lyrics? And as soon as of course, well, yeah, I see lyrics are a kind of form of poetry. And do you have kids? Did you read them nursery rhymes when they were kids? Do you go to football matches? Have you heard the chants that some of these guys come up with on the football terraces? Pretty poetic.
Yeah.
Poetry is all around us all the time.
Yeah.
Everyone can be a poet.
Absolutely.
And that is the message that I want to try and get across first and foremost. Once we've got up that first hurdle, it's everywhere and we can all do it, then you can say, well, everyone, including the Poet Laureate, can improve.
Yeah.
We can all improve if we listen to each other, if we think through together. So we want the National Poetry Centre to, first of all, be accessible, but second of all, to help people get better at it. And then, hopefully continue to get better at it. And then the third layer of it is that we do believe in something which you might call quality, excellence. We can debate what that is and what excellence means and where excellence comes from. But we want to try and celebrate great poetry. And we want to put the greatest poets on stage, and we want to make good poets into great poets by celebrating them. And so that's how the National Poetry Centre will be organised, in 3 layers of activity, from the most accessible through learning to the greatest poetry that there is from all over the world. So that's the kind of pyramid of joy that we're trying to bring to the world.
I mean, it's so ambitious and so incredible, and I can't wait to see how that all unfolds. Thank you for talking us through it. So we're going to jump into the kind chat now. And so kind has 4 letters, and I'm using each letter for a word to kind of frame our chat. And the first letter is K. So for K, I'd love to know what's in your creative kitchen, what you use to kind of cook up kindness for yourself.
Well, this is such an interesting question, and since you told me that you wanted to talk about kindness, I was so pleased, and my first reaction was like, kindness. I'm not sure whether I'm actually very kind to myself all that often. And I was talking about it with my wife, and she said, "Yeah, you're actually pretty harsh on yourself quite often. You're kind to other people, but kind to yourself, you're quite not." And my first reaction was to be a bit sort of worried about that. And then I started thinking, kindness is probably something which, ever since like Margaret Thatcher knocked it out of us, is something that has been pushed away. We don't value it in society. The jobs in which kindness is paramount, like nursing and caring, these are the lowest paid jobs in society. And what society values is ambition and competition. And the richest people are the ones who have been unkind to the people by forcing them to pay more than they should for things. And unkindness is what breeds success. And so you made me realize that actually, if I'm not being kind to myself, or if I'm pushing myself too hard, that's not a good look. I'm playing into the Thatcherite capitalist system, which I resisted so much, and I still resist now. So you made me think, actually, that kindness is really important. And it made me start to think about this idea, which I mentioned a second ago, that kindness is actually, what is kindness? It's about noticing what's needed and trying to fill that gap. If you go out of your way for someone else because they can't do something, then you're being kind to help them, aren't you? But you needed to notice what they needed before the kindness had any effect. If I just buy you something lavish and you don't need it, then is that kind, or is that just ostentatious? Yeah. Observation, noticing, and empathy are a key component of kindness. And I think I do, in that respect, try very hard to be kind to the people around me, to people who are working for me, to the people in my life, to my friends. And I do try very hard to notice how I can help them. And then it made me think, coming back to answering your question about kindness in my direction, I've always kind of thought, look, I've been born into this body. I didn't choose this body and this, but I've been born into a privileged situation, and enlightened. I hope I'm a slightly enlightened person. We've been taught, and we've taught ourselves how to notice our privilege, and that is necessarily sort of saying, like, I don't need to be kind to me, and I don't need to be kind to myself because I've already got this privilege. So we're pushing away anything which privileges us, and I might think that being kind to myself is like, I'm going to take a holiday, but I can only take a holiday because I've got enough money, because I come from a middle-class background. And so you can see how society makes being kind to yourself actually quite difficult if you're a white man of a certain age and a certain background. Nevertheless, I do think that as a leader of an arts organisation, if I'm not kind to myself, then I'm not modelling behaviour. Some of the people that work with me, I need to model kindness in order to help other people be kind as well. So I think it's very important, thanks to your questions, for me to think about how I can be better at it and try and take more time to look after myself. So there is one thing which I did, which I think is an act of great self-kindness, which I want to tell you about, which was when I left the Edinburgh Book Festival after 15 years of, it was a very big and very busy festival, which every year, and my sister would attest to this, it nearly killed me. It really, really was an exhausting experience. And at the end of each festival, it would take me 3 months to get over the mental damage that had been done by 18 days of 24-hour day, pretty much, activity. It was really, really hard. Yeah. And I knew I had to stop, otherwise it would have really done me damage. So when I stopped, I took my bike. I had 6 weeks before I had any more work I had to do. I flew in an airplane to the south of Spain with a bike and a tent, and I cycled my bike back through Spain and through France and through England and back to Edinburgh, and it took 33 days. Wow. And I realized that was a very necessary thing to do, just to have that meditative time on my own, cycling through the countryside on gravel tracks and back roads through Europe to kind of cleanse all the stress that I'd had for the 15 years before.
Yeah. I mean, that is a physical feat, but I can imagine there's a kind of mental and emotional element to that as well. And it just speaks to the fact that stopping to think about what it is you need for kindness towards yourself is not a one-size-fits-all. It is cycling through Spain, or it's going off on a one-night retreat, or it's having a bath. Like, it's so individual, but it's reminding yourself to take that time to reflect on what you do need. And that's remarkable. And I suppose sometimes it might take a bit of reflection in hindsight as well, because it may be that you just needed that and that was your path in the moment, but then afterwards to go, oh, that was a really kind act towards myself.
Whilst I was on that bike ride, I witnessed acts of kindness towards me which took my breath away and which made me, I mean, I was in a kind of slightly strange headspace, but I believed that I was visited upon by angels, metaphorically, whilst I was on that ride. One of those angels was, I was cycling through northern Spain. I'd already I'd zigzagged my way across Spain. It was about 18 days into the ride. And I'd got to, what's it called? The northern, begin with B, not Catalonia, but the Basque Country, thank you. I was in the Basque Country, and I don't know if any of you know about cycling, but in the Basque Country, they are mad on cycling.
Okay.
Right, look, I'd cycled across Spain, and I was pretty fit by then.
Yeah.
I was doing 100 miles a day. Wow. Every day, I was pretty fit. And then I started being overtaken by these guys, all sort of in, with their lycra and their legs shaved and the smell of some kind of embrocation on their legs. And I just started thinking, I am an old man. I've lost my touch. And it was very hilly, and I was absolutely at my wit's end. And then suddenly, alongside me, comes a guy. I don't know, he must have been in his 40s or 50s. And he said, hi, in English. Hi, how are you doing? And I said, I'm okay, but, And he said, where are you going? And I said, well, I'm cycling to San Sebastian, about 80 miles away. And he said, I'm going there too. Would you like me to ride with you? And at first I thought, no, I don't need you to. And then I thought, that'd be nice, actually. And we started chatting, and he told me his life story, and I told him my life story. And over the course of the next 4 hours or so, we whisked our way and arrived in San Sebastian without me thinking about it. And he got me through what was probably going to be the hardest day. And I knew this was an angel who'd landed when I needed him most. And we got to the city border of San Sebastian, and he just said, well, I'm off then. Bye. And he just...
And that was that?
What was your name? I need your email address. And he just... It was just an act of pure kindness on his part to accompany me for about 80 miles through the countryside, over the mountains.
That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. And I wonder if that's maybe his act of kindness towards himself too, of gathering stories from people like yourself. Yeah. That's gorgeous. We're going to move to the next letter in the word kind, which is I, and it's for inspiration. So where do you find inspiration?
Well, as a festival organizer and literary programmer, I find inspiration from the writers that I meet. And having run a really, really big book festival, literary festival, I had the privilege of meeting thousands upon thousands of people. And it quickly became clear to me that the most famous writers or the most famous people, Nobel laureates, were not necessarily the people who inspired me the most. Very often the people who inspired me were the people who were marginalized, people who'd struggled to have their voices heard. And so the most inspiring writers I've met are, for example, indigenous women of northern Canada, struggling for their language, the Inuktitut language. Only 13,000 people speak that language now. And they're under threat, in the area of land that they own is under threat because the oil companies are trying to take their land away from them in order to put big pipelines through it. And they're resisting that through language, by insisting on keeping the Inuktitut language. And Josephine Bacon If you haven't heard of her, you really ought to. Josephine, it's like bacon, sizzling bacon. She must be about 4'4"
Wow.
high. She's about this tall.
Yeah.
She's probably 80.
Wow.
She walks with a stick, and in her other hand will be a cigarette. And she's got the most gravelly voice. And I just adored her. Indigenous woman. The Innu people, they're not Inuits, so they're not Eskimos, but the Innu people is a particular people. Mm-hmm. And her story and her words were just more inspiring than any Nobel laureate for literature you could meet.
Yeah.
So they're the people that inspire me. The people whose stories don't necessarily easily get heard, and yet they fight to tell them anyway.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, she sounds like an absolute powerhouse. What a privilege to have met her. Eh? Yeah. Wow. I'm going to mention we're halfway through the word kind, so we'll talk about the other two letters, but we will have a bit of time for Q&A as well. So if there's anything you're thinking that you'd like to ask, you'll be very welcome to. So it's interesting. So for N, the word that I have chosen is noticing, and you've mentioned noticing quite a bit already. And so the question that I've come up with for this is what you're noticing about kindness. What else can you say about that?
Yeah, what more can we say than we've already said? But that I do think it's the fundamental element of how we can be kind.
Yeah.
And the reason why I think it's useful and important in my case is because I'm thinking about poetry in particular, but literature more generally. We are writing to try to make sense of the world. We are writing to try to make sense of ourselves in the world. And what purpose can poetry have, apart from obviously making ourselves feel better? But if it's going to make a difference in the world to other people, then it will be because of the particular way in which we notice. And so noticing is, for example, the poet Alice Oswald, who's one of my favorite poets, told me that she spends a lot of her time, she goes out into the field, and she lies down on her stomach. And she lies down with her face down in the grass, kind of close to the grass. And she just waits. And it will take, for an hour, she'll be lying there, feeling the kind of damp coming through her clothes, and just waiting to see what happens. And after it might take minutes and minutes and minutes before she notices a little insect crawling through, or the slight rustle of the grass in the wind, or a sound, or a smell, or the piece of grass brushes against her cheek, and she notices the feeling of the grass on her cheek. And the way in which we can, I think modern society actually militates against noticing. It's pushing stuff in our face super quick, TikTok style, kind of bam, bam, bam. And we think we're noticing, but actually perhaps we're not. We're missing so much by not slowing down, by not taking our time. And I think if we want to be good writers and good poets, then noticing better is probably the fundamental starting point for that. So one example of that, again, sorry to come back to my sister, Kath, but just because it was fresh in my mind, we were walking along the canal and there were lots of narrow boats. And Kath was telling me that she's in the middle of writing a novel at the moment. Sorry to break that news to everyone. And she said, it's great, one of my characters lives on a narrowboat. And we were sort of saying, why is it interesting to have a character who lives on a narrowboat? What is it about a narrowboat? What does that symbolize or signify? And we were noticing that in our minds, somebody who lives on a narrowboat is probably somebody who's a bit unconventional, somebody who's a bit of an outsider, somebody who maybe limits their possessions to a small number of things, and that in noticing what kind of person lives on a narrowboat, without generalizing, we started to notice what kind of character could emerge as part of Kath's novel that she's writing. Mm-hmm. So it's just one example of how we can think through, we start from a position of something which comes to us through our gut, then we can start to notice why that matters and how that can have meaning for us, and then it allows it to kind of come up through into words which either come out of our mouth or onto the page.
I love that just as an image and a moment to share with a loved one about a creative pursuit that they have. But it really also helps to remind us that writing looks like a lot of different things. So it is going for a walk on the canal and imagining someone who lives in a canal boat, as well as the traditional pen on paper, fingers on a keyboard. Like, writing is noticing and discussing and imagining and sort of unpicking those ideas. So the noticing is a huge part of the writing process as well.
And we were just earlier on. We were just waiting to start this event, and we noticed how sticky the floor is in here. And we were thinking about, like, why, what does it feel like when your feet are kind of all stuck to the ground, and it feels like magnets on the floor, or gravity's extra strong here, like we're on the moon or something.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what you were saying before too about the sensory element of it is really key. So I've been in a couple of workshops because, having done loads of poetry delivery myself, I still love attending workshops, like what you were saying before. You're constantly learning and developing and growing. And I was in one with Inua Ellams, who is I've forgotten the word now.
Poet.
He is a poet. He is an ambassador, I think, for First Story, the creative writing charity I work for. So he was working with some of our alumni members, and he took them through a writing exercise that very much went through kind of sensory elements. And he said that he will use it himself to unstick himself if he's feeling a bit kind of blocked with writing. And it just feels so accessible to use senses as a way into exploring writing, but also using senses as a way to notice kindness. Yeah, what am I feeling? What am I hearing? What am I seeing? So yeah, thank you for that. We're coming to our final letter in the word kind, and that's D, and the letter I've chosen is dream. So what do you dream of for kindness in the future?
Well, I mean, can we have a revolution? Can we have a new socialist world where there's more equality and there's more justice, and where maybe if we can't have that, then I don't know. I think there's so much worry about technology and so much anxiety around AI and around social media and so on. But I think we've also, we owe it to ourselves to try and see the good in those things, because they're with us anyway. And so we owe it to ourselves to, rather than becoming victims of these kind of robots that are going to kill off humanity, is actually to insist that AI helps us to be better. Do you remember during COVID, the first lockdown, when we were all sort of terrified that the humanity was going to die off? And Arundhati Roy wrote an essay. I don't know if you heard about it, but she said it's like we're going through a portal to a new world. The pandemic everything from the old world is finished, and we're going through this portal into a new world, and it's a new world of opportunity. And our responsibility is to try and make sure that world is a good world. And now, obviously, it was such a hopeful essay, and I was really inspired by it. And then we saw what actually happened. With kind of corrupt PPE contracts and very badly rolled out stuff from crap governments and so on. But I do think that Arundhati's idea that we are going through a portal to a new world could equally apply to this AI era that we're going into, where we are going to have more support for our creativity and more support in all sorts of ways from AI. So rather than sort of putting our fingers in our ears and sort of pretending it's not there, I dream that we could become the ones who insist that AI is good in a good world, and that kindness and society and togetherness and equality are built into the way in which we insist that the world must be with technology. And if we can do that, then we've got a chance of helping the Josephine Bacons of this world to avoid having pipelines driven through their land and their language taken away from them. So, yeah, maybe we just have to kind of believe that together we're going to resist the way in which people who want to make a lot of money are going to use these technologies against us, and we can insist that there are those of us who don't believe that making money is the only thing that matters, and that we will use that technology against them to make sure they don't run off with all the money and it's shared out properly.
That feels really empowering, because it does feel very daunting sometimes that this thing is kind of coming at us, this behemoth of AI, but that there is still agency that we can hold, and choices that we can make, even though that does feel impossible sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've been thinking a lot about culture in cities, because I'm trying to set up a cultural building in a city. And I'm trying to persuade people in the city of Leeds and in people in West Yorkshire to embrace the idea of a cultural building in the city. And you can imagine some of the sort of long in the tooth councillors who are a bit like, what are we doing spending money on culture when we've got we need the bins emptied and when there's kids who can't feed themselves. And I don't deny that there are serious challenges in cities like Leeds, cities like Manchester, cities like Huddersfield, towns like Huddersfield, serious challenges which need to be fixed. However, I still think that simply keeping people from dying and having good housing is not enough. Culture is one of the reasons for living. Just being alive isn't enough. We need reasons for joy. Culture is one of those things. There can be other things too, eating out together, going to watch sports matches, and so on. But the best cities, the cities that people want to visit, are the ones where culture is thriving and vibrant. If you want to be a first-class European city, you've got to have culture. Go to Madrid, go to Toulouse, go to Marseille, go to Milan. They've all got amazing culture or design or fashion. It is important because cities thrive as a result of that, and because people want to move to cities, to be in cities where that kind of thing happens. So we culture makers, far from being the ones who are kind of like the impoverished ones who are kind of asking whether we can have a bit of funding to try and do our next thing, we're the ones who make the cities worth living in. It's a human right to have joy in our lives, just like it's a human right to have good health and a good education. And culture should be part of that. And let's not be ashamed of that. My dream is that our leaders, our political leaders, are kind enough to the citizens of the world that they make provision for culture for everybody. Everybody. Not just the ones who can afford it. That's my main dream.
Absolutely. I'm going to send this to number 10 and make sure that this gets heard by people. Because I think what you're saying is there's such passion behind your words, and you're such a good fit for the role that you're in with the National Poetry Centre. And I think so many would agree with you about culture being vital to living. And it also makes me think that it circles back to some of the things you were saying before about how creativity builds our kindness and our empathy and our compassion. And so it's almost kind of like feeding into itself. If that is baked into the way that we exist as humans, then surely that feeds into political scenarios too, where people have the wherewithal, the knowledge to build compassion and kindness into the decisions they're making, because that does feel pretty absent these days.
Absolutely. I mean, when I lived in Scotland, up until a few years ago, I spent most of my time in Scotland, and running a literary festival where the First Minister of Scotland was well known to be a reader, and I invited her every year to come to interview people for me at my festival, and she agreed with such passion. Nicola Sturgeon is genuinely a passionate reader, and a proper reader. And having a First Minister who had read all the books was really extraordinary, and it definitely did show a kind of empathy and compassion, which she put into her political decision making. Now, of course, there were a lot of people who used it to try and knock her down. What's she doing reading books when she should be sorting out the country's problems? Of course, there were people who said that.
Of course.
But I think a good majority of people felt that Nicola Sturgeon's interest in reading was a good thing for a politician. And, contrast that with that guy, the orange guy across the Atlantic, who's proud of the fact that he doesn't read, and it's such a bad look.
Yeah, definitely. It makes me think of, what you were saying about poetry before and the aims of the National Poetry Centre to really have as the bedrock foundation that everyone believes they can be poets. It's a kind of rebrand for poetry, if you like. I feel, and I'm hoping with this podcast in some small way to rebrand kindness a little bit for those who think that it is this wishy-washy, weak thing, that actually it is essential and it's a strength for people to have it.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm so glad you made me think about it, because I hadn't really thought through the value of kindness. And now, from preparing for this and talking to you now, I really think it's such an important quality that we could celebrate.
Absolutely. And I have had my own kind of questioning myself a little bit sometimes, going, well, we need kindness out in the world. So why am I asking people about being kind to themselves? And then I immediately go, because that's how kindness going out into the world happens, because we need to nurture that inwardly for it to ripple outwardly, which segues nicely into the next section about a Q&A, asking outwardly. If anybody has any questions for Nick. Hey listeners, Rose here. I'm interrupting our live chat to let you know that we had a little bit of issue with the mic and we didn't have our first question picked up on the recording. So to summarize, our wonderful audience member asked that with Instagram being a way that poetry is shared, there is some unkindness visited on some Instagram poets. And is that kind of poetry not considered quality by the wider public? Back to the chat.
I love that question. And immediately I'm thinking about a poet. I'm not sure if you'll have heard of her, but she's called Len Penny. Do you know Len Penny? She's a Scottish poet, and she always writes poems which have got that rhythm. It's called... It's not pentameter, it's a quatrameter. It goes da 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 da. Really simple poetry, always rhymes, often using Scots language. And she's an Insta poet, and she's got a poetry podcast which is all about unusual Scottish words. And she wrote a book called Poems, which is a kind of Scottish pronunciation of poems, poems. And then it was an absolute massive bestseller. She wrote another book. The second book is called Poems Anor, which means, in Scots, means poems as well. And it was reviewed in, I think it was the Times. The Times poetry reviewer reviewed it and described it as execrable. And he said it was the worst. Len Penny is the worst poet since the 17th century.
Oh my goodness!
It was absolutely vicious, this review of Len's work. Now. It's really interesting, isn't it? The Times poetry reviewer says it's execrable and the worst poet since the 17th century. And this is, Len Penny's poems are some of the best-selling poems in the UK. Not only in Scotland, but in the whole of the UK. What's going on? Is it quality or not? So I was invited, I was very pleased to be invited to interview Len in a book festival event on the Scottish borders. It was a small town in the Scottish borders, somewhere north of Northumberland, south of Edinburgh. And I didn't know what the audience would be like. But within 3 days of this going on sale, the event was sold out. It was like a 200-seater room, sold out. And Len comes on stage, and Len arrives, and she's absolutely in bits because of this review. Like, oh no, I'm not sure I can go on stage, and I think they all hate me. I said, look, you've got 200 people who signed up like that. Let's go on stage and let's see what people think. And it was, smart people in the audience, absolutely loving what she had to say. And her poems, whether or not that you could say they were technically brilliant, who says what is technically brilliant? Who says what quality is? But they landed with that audience, and they were meaningful to that audience, and they had something to say about what it is to be a woman, and especially what it is to be a woman struggling in the world in a patriarchal society when a lot of the system is against you. And you could see in the audience, not just the women, but the men as well, hearing her words and getting something out of it. And to me, that signified quality. The poems landed and had meaning with the people who were listening to them. Okay, so as a sod to the Times reviewer, he's got his view, he's entitled to his view, but when it comes to talking about quality, that doesn't mean people who satisfy some kind of academic idea of excellence. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people who reach out and are heard by other people. And I think there are many different kinds of poetry. Some of the poetry I like is very technical, is very experimental, as Oswald's poetry is technically sublime, in my view. But equally, there are poets who can stand on a stage and whose poems you don't have to read. You hear their words, they land inside your head, and they have profound, life-changing meaning. And if that's not quality, I don't know what is. So I want a very, very wide definition of quality. So I'm really glad that you asked that. And I go back to that, the indigenous poet, Josephine Bacon. And she had to relearn Innu because she actually grew up speaking French. She was sent to one of those residential schools for indigenous kids, where there was a lot of abuse and a lot of, it's happened all over the world by colonial societies. She had Innu forced out of her as a young girl. She was taught French, and she had to relearn Inuktitut, sorry. And her poetry is rudimentary, let's say, and it speaks of the land and the land that they're about to lose. And technically speaking, you could say it's quite kind of basic poetry, but for me it's profound, and to me it's of the highest quality. And so I think that what constitutes quality might have different cultural meanings and different cultural ideas, and we should. And I loved the idea of having that debate. Kind of, if what's quality for you may not be quality for me, and we can argue about that. So when I want to put quality on stage, I want to ask you what you think is quality, and invite you to ask somebody you think is a high-quality poet to speak at the National Poetry Centre. Then I want to ask you what you think is quality, and it might be in opposition to what she says. And then I want to ask you about its quality, and you might have a completely different idea again. And then we can start showing that quality takes many different forms. And then I think we'll have a diverse and an engaging and a properly enriching programme with quality as part of the discussion of what it is. Does that make sense?
Wonderful. Thank you for that question. Great stuff. Would anyone else like to ask a question? Yeah.
I'm starting my Masters in September in English Literature with a focus on poetics and AI. And I kind of just wanted to pick your brain as to ways in which we can do work to have poetics survive AI and thrive in AI, because it's kind of coming whether we want it or not, and how that links into your work academically as a visiting professor of therapy.
So just to repeat the question, so it's how can poetics survive and thrive with AI, like the phrasing of that, and how that fits into the work that you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think the subject of AI elicits lots of passion and a lot of concern, and reasonably enough among creative people, because if you, for example, you can ask AI to write a poem in the style of Simon Armitage about a particular subject, and it will come back with something pretty credible, because there's enough of Simon Armitage's poetry out there in the world that it can pick up on it and it can regurgitate it, and it will throw you out something, and you think, do you know what? I wouldn't know that wasn't actually a real Simon Armitage poem. So, reasonably enough, people are anxious about the effect it's going to have. But what I feel is that AI is, and you know this better than I do, is a large language model, which is a predictive model. So it predicts what word will come next on the basis of what word that's come before, on the basis of all the words that are out there. So it's essentially, it's a kind of, it's all about probability. What's the most likely word to come after this word that's just been used? So all it can do is to use what's already out there and predict on the basis of what's happened before. So it's very difficult for AI to be truly innovative. It isn't intelligence. It is copying. It's artificial copying and regurgitating. So that I think we can try and find a kind of courage in that whilst it's possible for us to be tricked into thinking that something has been written afresh, all it's really doing is drawing on all the great human activity that's happened in the past. Now, I know it's also true that human creativity is often based on what we've learned, the words we've learned, and what we've read, etc. So, there are real complexities to this. But I think we've got to get canny about this and savvy about this and understand how we can try and take strength from what it can offer. So one example, in the Young Poet Laureate program that we've been involved in, we had 130,000 young people around England involved in poetry and writing poems in schools. And of those people, about 1,500 of them submitted an application they applied to become a Young Poet Laureate. And they had to write a poem and send it to us with a text which said why they wanted to be a Young Poet Laureate. And there was some quite extraordinary poems that were sent in, to the point where we were looking at some of them and kind of going, could a 10-year-old have written that? Could this have had any, dare I say it, assistance from anyone? And we realized that it was a pretty harsh. Who were we to say that this person had definitely used some kind of assistance? Some of them might have had assistance from a parent, a teacher. Some of them might have had assistance from a computer. Some of them might have just dredged it up out of their own minds, from reading books. I don't know. So we thought we couldn't assume that we knew that AI had been used. But what we did know was that if we got them into a room and did a workshop with them all morning and asked them to write a new poem in front of us, that we'd soon get a sense of the comparison between what they had written before and what they were capable of writing right there in front of us. And we started, without accusing anyone of anything, we soon saw the young people who had it in them to dredge up amazing vocabulary just out of their own heads. I mean, there are some people who do that brilliantly. And there were other people who might have done that once for the poem they submitted, but couldn't access it again for us. And we decided that we'd take that as a kind of a way of judging whether AI might have helped them too much, but without actually sort of pointing a finger, because that would have been unfair. So I only use that as an example because I realized that AI is there, AI is going to help. AI can help you edit, AI can help you, can critique what you've done. But in the end, when we're in front of each other, person to person, and creating together, we will know who the creative ones are, where the brilliant ones are, where the people who engage with us and touch us in our hearts will know that, and AI won't be anywhere near that.
Thank you for that question. And I think it is important to keep talking about this because it is this thing that is present in our lives. And though I also sometimes want to just close my ears and go, la, 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 it is more important to face it. And I think what's important to remember with AI as well is in talking about it, it doesn't mean we condone it or accept it. We are just exploring it and talking about where there might be some positives with it. So yeah, thank you for that question. We are coming to the end. I will say as a side note, we are running slightly over, so if you need to dash away for anything, that is completely okay. But to finish off, I wonder, so the tagline that I've come up with for this podcast is exploring ways for us to keep kind, creative, and connected. And I wondered, Nick, if you have a top tip for how to do that.
How to keep kind, creative, and connected. Well,
just a small ask,
I was instantly I wanted to say try to spend time with people, but then I was thinking, oh well, there are some people who find that hard to be with people, and that's okay too, isn't it? But generally, I think human connection is one of the most nourishing and the most important things that we can have. And so, if it's okay with you to spend time with other people, then I think that's the best. Listen to each other. Work together, create together. So I should finish off with a kind of plug for what I'd like the National Poetry Centre to do, and that is that I think about open mic events. The open mic scene across the north of England is absolutely phenomenal. Not just in Yorkshire, in Manchester too. It's incredible how many people get together in back rooms of pubs and read their work out to each other. I really love that. But one of the things which I observe about it, which is not to critique the whole open mic scene, is that the feedback that poets get for their work is often not as sophisticated as it might be. So here we are presenting poems to a room full of other people who also write poems, and that we're not getting any, or we get occasionally people going, great poem, really loved that one. Really good. But, I would love to create situations in which there can be more feedback, constructive, support for somebody who's written something and has been brave enough to present it on a stage, and then afterwards think, why did you use that image of the candle there? What was it doing, the flickering of the candle? That was powerful, but you could have maybe even gone further if you'd thought of the, I'm just kind of riffing on something. Feedback, support, nurturing. These things are what we can get in a room, and I'd like to create a kind of open mic plus set of events where, yes, come and work on your poem, but then get some feedback from people you trust to help you get to that next stage. Because I think that there are many people in the open mic scene who've been doing it for a few years who are kind of stuck at a plateau of doing reasonably well, but wondering what they can do next. And I think that's what I'd like to be able to do. And so that's how we can be kind to each other, by listening. Maybe after this you can say, well, some of the things you said were great, and some of the things you said, not so much, don't go there anymore. This podcast format is amazing, but you could add something more to it. And we can all help each other because we're in the room together, connected and focusing together on something. So that's the answer.
That shared learning and dialogue and connection, which is just vital.
Yeah.
You said the word nourishing earlier as well, and I think that's it. I think it's part of what feeds us as humans.
Yeah. And I think, so I know we've got to finish. Dialogue, thank you for using that word. Dialogue, it seems to me, is like fundamental. Dialogue implies not only speaking, but also listening to each other. It's a dia. It goes in both directions. And dialogue is something which I think the forces of social media act against dialogue. They push us into divided spaces. They say, you believe something, I believe something else, and we can barely be in the same room with each other. I can't, you make me feel unsafe just by having that view. And how are we going to overcome divided society? We live in an age when people are voting for political parties which have quite difficult views from different from mine. Are we just going to push them away and never meet them and like what's happened in America? I don't think we should do that. I think we need dialogue. And I think festival events, literary festivals like this, are spaces where we can have dialogue. I might come up with a view which you find difficult, but you can come back to me and say, hang on a minute, what about this perspective? And I think dialogue is absolutely critical. We've got to insist on dialogue if we possibly can, even if we're in the room with people whose views we find pretty hard to stomach.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that sense of we can still be kind in that. We can disagree and be kind. We can challenge and be kind. And I think we're often pushed into settings where we're supposed to shame and berate and call out, whereas calling in for some actual debate, discussion, dialogue only breeds goodness, really. This has been wonderful. This has just been an absolute joy. Thank you for being here. Thank you, audience, for being here and for your lovely questions. A couple of things as we close. So we'll want to follow what's going on with the National Poetry Centre. What's the best way to do that?
Speak into your voice-activated whatever AI system. What is the National Poetry Centre doing? And it will give you an AI response, which will be accurate.
And Instagram?
You can find us. There are 3 words you need to type in: National Poetry and Centre, and you can find us on Instagram, LinkedIn. We don't do that X one. We don't do that one anymore. But yeah. Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook.
Wonderful. Well, we will keep an eye on things with excited anticipation for what's to come. And I want to say an enormous thank you to Amped for hosting us. Thank you, Ben, for doing the tech support. To the Huddersfield Literature Festival for being amazing, bringing words to life, and for this opportunity to record this live podcast. And an extra special, huge thank you to you, Nick Barley. Can we give Nick a big round of applause? Thank you. A huge thank you for taking the time to tune in. We'll have another episode coming your way soon. You can like and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, and YouTube, and captions are available. If you want to find out more about me and my work, you can drop me a line through my website, rosecondo.net, and there you can see amazing illustrations by Neve Wood, also known as Little Badger. Our beautiful music has been composed and recorded by Eleonora Rosca. And finally, please share this. Help us to keep kind, creative, and connected.